One of the questions we get asked most often is, how did you learn to do all this? Raising animals, growing gardens, cooking and preserving food, the skills, the know-how that makes up our homestead today. To be honest, the answer is not that straightforward. We didn't grow up in or even around homesteading or farming. Both of us were from the suburbs, and the extent of my gardening recollection was picking cucumbers at my grandma's once a year, and the only things I raised were bunnies, and I don't mean meat rabbits, goldfish, and hamsters, and popping open a can of soup felt like a dinner win. Today, on our 5-acre homestead in northern Illinois, we have cows for dairy and meat, chickens for meat and eggs, gardens and orchards that grow the bulk of the produce we rely on all year, and we regularly sit down 3 times a day to from-scratch meals around the kitchen table. That transition didn't happen overnight. There were different stages of learning and dreaming, consuming and doing, and then taking some risks that led to where we are now in this journey. The current circumstances of our homestead this past week have us reflecting back on how we got here, the many lessons learned, and what we wish we knew sooner. New life. Taking action to prevent rather than react. The methods we're still perfecting but getting better at. Join us this past week on our homestead, or maybe more realistically, the tale of the past 12 or so years on how we learned to homestead in the first place.
Oh, there's already a baby there.
There is?
She had a baby. There's a calf. It's trying to get up.
Oh goodness. Oh my goodness.
All right, let's get in there.
We missed it. We've had Thimble, our Jersey milk cow, for about 7 years, and she was due with her 5th calf any day now. She's consistently calved right around her due date, and it being the day before her due date, she was seemingly ready to go. So we were out there checking on her every hour or so to see how she was doing. Well, somehow, between those afternoon checks and rainstorms that we were experiencing, labor must have picked up and she delivered this beautiful baby heifer that we were shocked to find had already come. It couldn't have been too long ago, but she's pretty well cleaned off. Oh, you are a very stealthy laborer, Thimble. Oh, oh! Go, girl!
You got it, you got it, you got it.
It's a little girl.
It's a girl.
It's a girl.
Good job.
You got it.
You got it. You
Got it. So how did we go from hamsters to 800-pound lactating bovines? Well, for a short stint between the suburbs and our current homestead spot, we spent a year working on a farm in Wisconsin, which we'll talk more about that opportunity later. While we were living in town, some friends of ours offered to sell us their milk cow. At that point, we'd never milked a thing in our lives, and our only option was to board her at the farm that Jim was working at. After reading the book, The Family Milk Cow Handbook, we said yes, and we went for it. While this felt big and scary at the time, we also knew that this was where the trajectory of our lives was heading, and felt deep down that it was the right move. If you didn't grow up around the farming or homesteading lifestyle like us, yes, you should do your homework, watch videos, etc. to prepare and make a calculated decision as much as possible. But in reality, the best learning comes on the job. In fact, while in Wisconsin, we befriended a local conventional dairy farmer up the road from us and learned so much from his lifetime of experience. Yes, we didn't see eye to eye on all the same methods, but he knew these animals intimately, and we're grateful he was patient enough to teach us city kids who couldn't even tell you the difference between hay and straw when we were starting. Rubbing shoulders with other experienced farmers and homesteaders near you can definitely be one of your best teachers. But Thimble's new calf that we named Coco was looking strong and healthy right from the start and has been doing great. Stella, our Maremma livestock guardian dog, has been a super sweet protector, and even Hazel, Thimble's older calf that's almost 2 now, has been showing a lot of great motherly qualities toward her. Go down a little bit more. Again, having baby calves was all new territory for us, but we've learned through trial and error to try and find the right balance of giving the cows space to figure things out on their own and helping them get started. Since those first hours and days can be crucial, we usually try to help the calf figure out how to latch and nurse from mama if she's not doing it within the first hour or two. After getting it once with a little guidance, they usually figure it out on their own pretty quickly from there.
One of the best ways you can learn to homestead is simply to start right where you're at. Long before having our own milk cow was even a pipe dream for us, we were living in the suburbs and driving out of our way to the local raw milk pickup spot and experimenting in the kitchen with making yogurt and cheese. Trips to farmers markets, farm stands, and U-Picks were our entertainment on the weekends, not just being casual shoppers, but befriending farmers, asking questions, and learning about their farms and practices. And as often as we could, taking the chance to visit these farms and see them firsthand.
3. All right, drop them in, guys.
And eventually, this led to even deeper learning opportunities. We had virtually zero gardening experience, but we became friends with some nearby farmers that ran a vegetable CSA and quickly learned about their work-share program, where in exchange for volunteering once a week at the farm, we'd receive a free box of veggies each week. This was huge for us. Not only did we get experience weeding rows, helping with harvest, and then being part of the washing and packing process to get boxes ready for all the CSA members, but rubbing shoulders with these seasoned vegetable farmers was so instrumental in learning the ropes of growing food. We got exposure to their greenhouse setup and starting seeds, how they planted and did things at scale, the organic methods they used, and tools that made the work easier. So much of how we garden today was inspired by the couple of years that we spent volunteering at this farm, and even other farms along the way as the opportunity popped up, giving us exposure to even more diversity of different methods. Maybe you don't have land to garden at all, or maybe you have land but have no clue where to even get started. Seek out those opportunities to volunteer around you. Today, farms are everywhere. From the many small-scale farms and homesteads in the country to urban farms, market gardens, and community gardens closer into cities, there are so many opportunities out there to learn to grow food and start your own garden. And maybe you can't always expect to get a veggie box in return, but from our experience, farmers and growers are usually more than generous to share some of the harvest.
One of the harder lessons we've had to learn and figure out on our own is weeds. Especially early on, we did little to keep weeds in check and often let them go to seed, leading to seed spreading and the weed problem getting worse and worse year after year. We've been more on top of weeds in recent years and are actively taking steps to reverse the damage that we let happen early on, but it's an ongoing and relatively tedious process that we've been working on a lot this past week. If you've seen our recent videos, you know that before planting this kitchen garden area several weeks back, we finally got around to mulching around this entire garden space, which should reduce weed pressure in the future by creating a barrier between our yard and the garden space. But our oldest daughter and I have logged quite a few hours out here hand weeding these rows early on, especially those where we direct sowed seeds like our carrot rows that are hard to get in there with something like a stirrup-hoe to knock the weeds down. For our other seedlings that we planted like tomatoes and cabbage, we'll probably come through later with a stirrup-hoe to chop those weeds down, and then maybe even add a layer of straw mulch over the rows to keep weeds from popping up in the future. It's interesting, we have 2 rows of onions, one that we planted right after prepping our garden rows, and then the other we waited about a week and a half before planting, and in the meantime Jim came through with a stirrup-hoe to knock down any weeds that popped up before getting our onion seedlings in the ground. And as you can see, there is so many less weeds in the row that we waited to plant on. We're trying to be more on top of this every year, but often those little timing things can make all the difference and save so much time down the road. Had we been able to get out there a week or so in advance and prep all the garden rows and then knock down those early weeds before actually planting, we'd probably have a lot less work here after the fact. But overall, everything is germinating and taking beautifully in this kitchen garden space.
And keeping on the theme of weeds, a good chunk of our past week was spent doing weed control out in this quarter-acre garden space where we grow the bulk of our storage crops like the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, as well as a row of potatoes and sweet potatoes. Then we have our orchard out here with 3 rows of 10 fruit trees each, and then between all those rows is where we raise our meat chickens on pasture, pulling them between the rows in chicken tractors. Again, much of the weed issues out here today are a result of not really knowing what we were doing when we first started out on our homestead. The weed pressure was actually pretty light for us those first couple of years, but when pockets of weeds did pop up, we either just didn't make it a priority or didn't have the forethought that we needed to nip those weeds in the bud before they went to seed and spread and became a bigger problem. Case in point, prickler plants. Or at least that's what we've been calling them. They've taken over parts of our rows of storage crops and also a large portion of the fenced-in pasture that we overwinter our cows in. They are annoying. Their roots go deep, and if they do flower and go to seed, like dandelions, their seeds carry in the wind and spread everywhere. And while I thought I've been taking care of them in the garden rows by tilling each spring, I've actually noticed that even a couple-inch section of the stem left in the soil can regrow and establish a new plant. So when the tiller comes through and chops the plant into 10 different pieces, it seems to just keep spreading endlessly. For now, keeping things mowed has at least allowed us to maintain and keep things from going to seed and spreading further. But part of this also comes from having the right tools for the job. We have a zero-turn mower, which I've found to be critical, especially for maneuvering around all those fruit trees. Then for mowing down our pasture areas, we have a mower attachment for the back of our compact tractor, along with a decent weed whacker for clearing out along fence lines. Just a few years ago, when our budget was a lot tighter and we didn't have equipment that made quick work of these sorts of tasks, it was much trickier to keep up with these weeds. I remember being out here with a hand weed cutter tool that you swing and chop the weeds down, and doing that across this whole field. Ultimately, the goal would be to eradicate these weeds entirely, so if anyone has advice on that, let us know. I've thought about a controlled burn, which might work in the open field, but I'm not sure I could do that in the area that we plant in with all the fruit trees around. For now, making sure to mow down these areas before things go to seed is at least keeping the problem from getting worse.
Another common question we get is, how do you do all this with kids? We have 5 kids, ages 8 months to 10 years, and while most of my work gets done while the 8-month-old is sleeping or being worn on my back, all the other kids have a role in the work that we do on our homestead. I just finished reading the book Mattering by Jennifer Wallace, and it was excellent. She says, again and again, I found that the kids who were thriving shared one thing in common, that they felt they mattered for who they were at their core. Mattering acted as a kind of protective shield that buffered against anxiety and depression. And then she goes on to talk about how mattering isn't just for kids, but it's for everyone, everywhere. So on these work days, everyone has an age-appropriate job. Whether that's weeding, hacking down weeds with loppers, or our 3-year-old whose job it is to collect up the weeds in her bucket and bring them to the burn piles, everyone plays an important role and makes a difference.
This resource might be a little outdated now, but one of the early farming podcasts we listened to was Farm Marketing Solutions with John Siskovich. And what John did was master the art of small-scale pastured poultry. So when I knew that we wanted to raise chickens for meat on our homestead, I turned to his book where he lays out very detailed, step-by-step plans on how to build his chicken tractor design. We've built 2 of these chicken tractors now, and they're sized to hold about 25 chickens each, which is right where we're at with each tractor this year, raising about 50 chickens total. His design is great as is, but I modified them slightly and added a metal roof in place of the tarp roof that was standard. I'm one who likes to come up with my own design for things, but when we were getting going on our homestead and things were moving a million miles an hour, the John Siskovich Chicken Tractor book was the perfect thing I needed to build something tried and true and focus my mental capacity elsewhere. And I did do a tutorial on my metal roof method in a blog post, which I can link below. Which again, yes, we had listened to podcasts about raising chickens for meat for years, but it would have been really intimidating just starting that on our own, let alone the whole butchering process, had we not gotten real-world experience before starting out. Going back to the farm that I worked at in Wisconsin for a year, they did a similar thing of raising chickens for meat where I got to be part of raising these birds from chicks, moving them in a similar sort of chicken tractor setup, and then all the way to a full-scale on-farm processing day that we got to partake in. That experience is really what gave us the confidence to go for it on our own land once we had it. These chickens are just a couple of weeks away from the processing date that we have scheduled later in June, but I know for us we are always looking for more help come processing day. If you know other farms or homesteads near you raising chickens for meat, find out when their processing day is, ask how you can help, and mark it on your calendar. It's such a good way to get hands-on experience and grow a deeper connection and appreciation for your food.
And really quick, going back to that year of working for a farm, that was a really big and pivotal time for us. We learned so many important farm and homesteading skills during that period that ultimately gave us the confidence to go for it on our own. But it was a big risk too. Jim left his career in construction management that earlier on we thought he'd be at for the rest of his career. We moved across state lines twice in 1 year and had numerous part-time jobs that allowed us to barely scrape by. And all the while we were moving toward farming and homesteading, which to many around us seemed like a very backwards move. For those observing, it seemed like we were floundering. But to us, we were learning and gaining the real-world experience that we needed to move in the direction that we felt called to. Jim had actually applied to a few different farm-related positions in the years leading up to this, including a greenhouse/farm manager at a local farm-to-table restaurant, and even an internship in sustainable agriculture down in Florida. So while yes, it was a big uprooting for us to leave our suburban home and everything familiar to us, it also felt calculated and like the right next step, trusting that God had a bigger plan in all of it. And he did. We learned so much about farming and even rural living in that year up in Wisconsin. It's ultimately where we found Thimble, our milk cow, who has been such a part of this whole journey for us. And then the timing of it all ultimately led us to our current homestead, which was the perfect opportunity at the perfect time and likely would have never been on our radar had we stayed in the suburbs. Learning to homestead may not mean leaving your career and moving out of state, but it may mean taking a risk or two that feels out of your comfort zone. Going for an opportunity that seems entirely impossible in your current situation. But those times of stretching yourself and going against the grain may be the very nudge you need to make your homesteading dreams a reality.
Now that everything around our gardens was all mowed down, we could get to weeding and weed control in both our Three Sisters garden row and our potatoes and sweet potatoes row. Joelle started out hand weeding our Three Sisters mounds. The corn has popped up pretty nicely in the mounds, but so did many weeds. We do some weeding with a wheel hoe or stirrup hoe around these mounds, but to not completely ruin the structure on top of the mounds, you really need to weed by hand. And then on the other row, I got to weeding the potatoes and sweet potatoes, where we'll also be laying down straw mulch after as a weed barrier. It's so relieving to be getting to this step earlier on, and I think we're actually hitting it at just the right time. The potato plants have mostly popped through, so I'm able to go up and down these rows with the wheel hoe, chopping out all the weeds while getting as close as I can to the plants we want to leave. With the potatoes, since those don't pop up in as straight of a line, I need to get in there and do a little hand weeding around the plants, which slows the process down. But where we planted our sweet potato slips in nice straight rows, it's pretty easy to cut in right next to those plants and knock out the majority of the weeds. It's also perfect timing because the potato plants haven't started bushing out yet and the sweet potatoes aren't vining. In years past, we've gotten to the weeding and mulching a month or two later, and the process is so much more tedious. I remember last year having to lift up every single potato plant to mulch underneath it. Plus at that stage, you can't really get in there with the wheel hoe and have to hand weed everything. We have so many straw bales left over from using them to insulate our chicken coop this past winter, so we're able to lay down a nice thick layer of mulch with it to hopefully keep the weeds back. We've never been this on top of weeding and mulching these rows before, so we're really hopeful this will free us up elsewhere in the summer months instead of being out here weeding.
We're done with planting for this year, besides beans and squash in the Three Sisters garden, which we need to plant in stages after the corn pops up. Now that we've done a round of weeding to clear the mounds out a bit, we can get to planting. We actually start by going back through and replanting any corn that didn't germinate initially. We want 4 corns per mound, so we just pop in another kernel whenever one is missing, and they'll usually catch up as the season goes on. For planting beans, we do either 4 or 6 bean plants per mound. This year we're doing 6.
Leave enough seed, otherwise I can run in and get some more.
We usually just plant them right around the corn, but close enough into our drip irrigation line running through the center so that they stay watered. We've shared before about how Jim joined a book club where they read the book The Resilient Gardener by Carol Deppe, and the timing of that was perfect since it was right when we bought our homestead heading into our first growing season. It really helped shape what we grew. She focused on growing the storage crops that we grow now in this space: corn, beans, winter squash, and potatoes. And that thinking has really shaped how we think about gardening. To not just harvest for fresh eating from our gardens, but to grow with the fall and winter months in mind, where you can harvest and store away crops to eat in the months after harvest.
After planting beans, we plant our squash seed in the smaller mounds between the bigger mounds with the corn and beans. We typically plant 3 seeds per mound and hope for about 2 plants in each space to germinate. The last few years we've landed on only planting butternut squash, but this year we ordered up seed for a different squash called Jarrahdale pumpkin that we're excited to try out. We planted about 5 or 6 mounds of the Jarrahdales and then did the rest in butternut. And going back to the vegetable CSA that we volunteered at earlier on in our journey, that was also formative for us in other ways besides just learning how to grow our own food. We saw how hard our farmer friends were working to barely scrape by, and while we had nothing but admiration for them, it also helped us to realize that that was not the path that we wanted to head down. We knew we wanted to grow nourishing, nutrient-dense food, but trying to grow so many different varieties of vegetables at that big of a scale felt so overwhelming for us. We're not trying to put down farmers at all, and if anything, it makes us want to support local farmers around us all the more, knowing firsthand the hard work they're putting in. But doing things on a homestead scale to grow food for our family felt much more doable, and specifically growing just the types of crops we're good at growing, enjoy eating, and give us the best bang for our buck, which is why our gardens today are pretty simple and we don't grow a crazy variety of things. And that wraps up our planting for 2026. We'll wait until those beans and squash pop up and then do a little more weeding and also come through and lay a thick layer of straw mulch down here to prevent weeds.
Like with weeds, addressing things early can avoid more headaches down the road. This is definitely true with cows or raising any animal for that matter. And while some of that can be learned in books and elsewhere, a lot of it is just learned through experience and when certain issues or circumstances pop up. We mentioned before how making sure the calf is nursing early and keeping a close eye on them can be critical, but that's also so true for mama. You can see how massive their udder gets when they calve and get their milk supply back, and mastitis or other issues can pop up quickly. We learned this the hard way in the week or so after Thimble had her previous calf, Hazel. Hazel figured out nursing pretty quickly, but this was also right around the time that my mom had passed away and I was busy with her funeral, and we weren't able to get out there and check on things as regularly as we would have liked, and Thimble developed mastitis in one of her quarters. We tried, but it was unfortunately too late for us to treat things naturally ourselves, and we needed to get a vet involved. But it was a good lesson learned for us to be regularly checking on Mama and making sure we were relieving some of that pressure for her, especially on those teats that the calf isn't nursing from yet, which in our case is usually the back ones. So at least twice a day for that first week, I was out there doing some milking on those teats that we knew that Coco wasn't nursing on. We've also found it really helpful to mix up what's called udder mud and spread that or massage it onto her udder to help loosen things up and prevent mastitis. She did have one quarter that was starting to feel hard and maybe slightly warm, so we started mixing this up and I'd massage it into those udders every time after milking. Within a day or two, everything had loosened up and I had no concerns of mastitis. All I do to make that udder mud is mix a 1-to-3 ratio of bentonite clay to water. The negative ionic charge in the bentonite clay attracts the positively charged ions in toxins and heavy metals to pull them out. It's a really cool thing. We actually use this in other things like a drawing cell for bug bites and in a hair mask to remove buildup in hair, and it works wonders. Mastitis is typically caused by a bacteria getting in through the teat and causing an infection, and the bentonite clay acts like a sponge to pull out that toxin and get things cleared up and moving again. The other thing that we found really helpful is to start halter training our calves right away. What we do is use a calf halter, put a post in the ground, usually a T-post, but we had this flexible post nearby today, so that's what we used, and tie her up to that while we're milking Thimble. This both helps get her used to the idea of being on a halter as well as milking time in case that they become a future milk cow. After a week or two, it's really crazy how quickly a calf will instinctually start running away and not be easy to approach with a halter. But Hazel is the first calf that we started doing this with, and she still lets us walk up to her and put a halter on and leads well on a halter. This is only the first or second day that we're doing it here with Coco, and it can take a little bit for them to get used to it. But it's so much easier to start doing it from the beginning versus trying to do it when they're older and much more challenging to approach. And being able to move all our animals quickly and easily was very helpful this week when we had threats of nasty storms and potential tornadoes and wanted to move everyone into the barn during the storm.
As we look back, we kind of view our homesteading journey in two different phases. The philosophical, or more the learning, absorbing, dreaming, and pondering. And then there was the doing, going out, putting meat on the ideas and thoughts, and making it all happen. That philosophical stage really happened over a number of years, watching documentary after documentary, visiting farms, taking courses, learning skills, trying new experiments in the kitchen. And over time, that absorbing information stage started to bleed into the doing. And today, It's mostly doing.
All right, guys, batten down the hatches, take cover, heading to the barn.
And I think some of our best advice for anyone wanting to homestead or in the beginning stages is to not remain in that learning stage forever. It's great and there's so much to learn and consider, but eventually move from a consumer to a doer. Along those lines, start right where you are at. We will always be firm believers that homesteading is a mindset and a lifestyle above all else. You don't need land or lots of land to be growing your own food, living within a local food economy, cooking from scratch, and learning preservation methods. If you can learn all of that before getting land, if that's your goal, that transition is going to go so much smoother.
Yeah, maybe tornadoes.
And the last nugget to leave you with, anything you can do to allow the rose-colored glasses to come off before you buy land and go all in with homesteading is a very wise approach. We spent enough time volunteering and working at farms to know full well what we were getting ourselves into. The hard work, the unpredictability, the dedication it would take. It was a calculated decision. When we look back on what we know today versus what we knew starting out, it's really a night and day difference. So don't let the learning be the barrier to the starting. Look for opportunities, find that first step, and take it, friends.